Namaste. Thank you for tuning in this afternoon for Project Politics, the Hindu Voice. My name is Vipasha, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the Hindu Experience Students Edition 2020. The National Hindu Students Forum UK was founded in 1991 with a vision to bring students together to protect, preserve, practice, and promote Hindu dharma. Today, NHSF UK societies across the country keep this vision alive. This conference, the Hindu Experience Students Edition 2020, is a celebration of Hindu identity and how dharmic values can be integrated with everyday life to build a better world. Today, we're here to discuss the importance of political participation, with a particular focus on carrying the Hindu voice in this sphere. So it's an honor to present to you our two speakers for this session, Pranav Bhanot and Jayesh Jotangia. Pranav Bhanot is chairman of Chigwell Parish Council, and he's also councillor for Chigwell Row. He's authored a book titled Get Me Elected, Strategies, Tips and Tactics of Election Success. He was former president of BPP Law School, and he studied law. He was also the national president of NHSF UK from 2011 to 2014. Welcome, Pranav.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. Our second speaker, Jayesh Jotangia, works as a barrister from 33 Bedford Row Chambers. He's previously been National Events Coordinator of NHSF UK during his student years. Jayesh was head coordinator of the Hindu Marathon in Coventry in 1999. He also has founded the All Party Parliamentary Group for British Hindus in 2013, which advises MPs and peers on matters concerning British Hindus. Additionally, he was the previous chair of the Hindu Lawyers Association UK. Welcome, Jayesh.
Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we begin, I'd just like to say to the audience that if you do have any questions that you'd like to have answered during the session, please do ask them via the YouTube live chat. So just keep them coming throughout the session. Anytime you think of anything, I'm sure our speakers would love to get bombarded with as many questions as possible, and we can dig deeper into our discussion through them. So to kick us off, I'm going to ask both of you to tell us a bit about your journey. So from being a student to where you are now, how did that unfold? So we heard you're both, lawyers or in law by profession. How did you end up in politics? So Jayesh, first, if you'd like to tell us.
Okay, so I've always wanted to actually study law, and quite obviously fortunate to get into a university that would accept me to get that qualification. But and I also wanted to become a barrister. I always knew that I wanted to become a barrister at quite an early age, I suppose. And it was, when I went to university, I got involved with the National Hindu Students Forum. And then whilst after university, after graduating, went to Innsel Court School of Law to study the bar vocational course. And then actually, I think it was at that point, I became National Events Coordinator for National Hindu Students Forum. And then after that, I've also qualified as a solicitor advocate and a mediator, but professionally speaking, I started off doing criminal law, and I was really passionate about that at university. In fact, quite a lot of my electives that I did concerned criminal litigation, criminal law, which ended up. I then did an internship in Chicago for about 4 months and started working on actually death row inmates on death row, which was really interesting. But you can never tell where you're going to end up, because now I don't do any criminal litigation. I've now veered into the complete opposite, which is civil litigation and professional disciplinary proceedings. You can never tell what's around the corner and what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting. Death row is quite a start for sure. But how did you get into politics? So that is something we're going to touch on later, the APPG. But was there always an inherent interest in politics there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. I think for us third, fourth, I don't know, fifth generation Hindus living here in the UK, it was always a matter of time that getting into politics, especially with regards to the All Party Parliamentary Group, that was inevitable. It was going to happen. There's APPGs for other faith groups, and so how the APPG started. Yes, I was interested in debate. I was interested in the legislation side of things. Obviously, you learn that as components in when you're studying law, how to apply that. But there was never that voice. There was never that collective cross-party voice in Parliament giving over the point of view as far as the British Hindus were concerned. And I think the caste issue that was doing its rounds around about 2010 up until 2000 and whenever it was, I think 2016, up until all of that time, but at the very beginning, around about 2010, 11, 12, being a member of Hindu Lawyers Association, the national Hindu organizations that were trying to battle this legislation always required some form of legal opinion, a legal assessment as to whether or not why this particular word, does it really need to become a protected characteristic? Does it really need to come into legislation? And that was from there was the formation of the APPG to say, basically, let's have a collective bunch of parliamentarians who can put these positions across on our behalf.
Brilliant. And I don't want to give away too much about the APPG because we will touch on it later, and it's a massive, massive topic that we should definitely dissect. But same question to Pranavji. So what was your journey like from university to profession to where you are now?
By way of preliminary point, I just want to say namaste. Thank you very much to the organisers, Vipasha, and also what a privilege it is to be speaking alongside Jayesh Jotangia, who is some years older than I am and has been a role model in many respects, both legally as well as politically. And thank you for those of you who are tuned in this afternoon. The first thing I'd like to say is politics, in my view, is more of a way of life than a profession. It doesn't stop as soon as you walk out of the office or walk out of the council chamber. Politics is with you wherever you are. And I think one of my key motivations right from a very young age was actually giving a voice to those that may not necessarily be confident or able to speak up about various topics. So going to your question, Vipasha, how did it all start? Well, it was at school. And I must say, I wasn't the most sportiest and I wasn't the most smart. In fact, I was in all the bottom sets pretty much. At the age of 10, I had a reading age of 7. So I really had to work really hard to try and get the same grades as many of my peers. And, it was one of those situations where, in a football match, when you're the last one to get selected by the 2 captains and no one really wanted you on their team, I kind of started off at rock bottom. And not many opportunities to represent my school. But a teacher did realize that I had a bit of a gob on me and I was able to speak. I'm not sure if that was a compliment or not, but I did get selected, probably because no one else wanted to do it, to represent my school in public speaking and debating competitions. And that was really good because that really meant that I had to start taking an opinion and a view on various topics because that's what I would speak about at these competitions. And then in turn, that allowed me to get involved in campaigns at school. One of the key campaigns I started at a very young age was to try and get more healthier school lunches. And I started to quite enjoy this actually, rallying around my friends, trying to get people to side with my point of view. And then it was my honor and privilege to go to university and serve on the NHSF committee up in Manchester, and then the national committee after that. And I'm not just saying that so I get invited next year to do the same talk. It was actually really insightful. And one thing when I was fortunate to be the president of the National Hindu Students Forum was to try and get NHSF to be more aligned politically and more engaged with all the major political parties that we have in this country. And I think, it's come a long way over the 25 years or whatever it's been since it was established. Having left university, I went to law school. I got involved in the student politics there and became the president of BBP Law School. And then I thought when working as a lawyer, I thought I'd really get my teeth into local politics. And in 2018, I stood in my first local election. And guess what? I failed. I didn't get elected. I lost with flying colours. But a year after that, I did succeed to become a councillor. And a year after that, I became leader, or what we call the chairman of Chigwell Parish Council. Rumour has it one of the youngest in the country, but I don't know. So I think that was really kind of my journey up to where I am now. And I really am indebted to the family, to my political associations, but also to NHSF and people like yourself who give this platform, but also the advisors, Nilesh Solanki, Sunil Bala and the likes, who really have been the role models. And one thing I would say to anybody listening is that I think NHSF is a fantastic platform for whatever career you want to go into, purely because it's got such a great network. And you tap into those networks. So I hope that gives a bit of an insight into where we are, and I look forward to having a fruitful conversation going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on this panel alone, we have two massive legacies of NHSF, and the networks that has spawned has been massive. So brilliant point. So you two are obviously very passionate about politics. You have been from a younger age, and I can feel that, and I'm like that as well. But what would you say to other youngsters out there who might be a bit, I don't want to use the word apathetic, but they might not have been introduced to it in the correct way, the correct channels might not be there for them. For people like that are not as engaged in politics, do they need to be engaged in politics? Or is it all right? As long as some people are, it's fine. Jayesh, what do you think?
No, I think it's important. Look, if we historically speaking, we as a community have not really been fully engaged with the political arena compared to other minorities in the United Kingdom, who are far better, far advanced. They know exactly what the system is and how to basically utilize that system for the benefit of their community. You made a point, Vipasha, at the very beginning, for that you've seen a change in the last 10 years or so, right? And that is correct. But it's like exercising, basically. You can't just run into a marathon without doing any exercise. And for us as a community, I believe that the last 10, 15 years, we have started to exercise. We've still got a lot more to do, but it's important for our younger generations, the Hindu generation in this country, to get involved at the very outset, because I fear for their loss of identity later on. And that's very important. We've got to be able to preserve and promote that at every level. But it's only, we've got to filter that into these systems, similar to into politics, into political parties, into APPG, into policymakers, institutions that make policy, for example. So that it is absolutely vital. And I wouldn't, just because us as a community, when I said historically speaking, us as a community, we haven't had that much to sort of deal with in terms of issues. What actually, what issues, what matters of concern does the Hindu community have? I think the trigger point was this caste legislation that happened around about 2010 and into years after that. That really sort of roughed the feathers, basically, and we had to wake up and we had to look at ourselves as a community, and we've now started to understand and appreciate that these are the systems, this is how to lobby, this is how to get people on board. It's a matter of convincing our parliamentarians. It's a numbers game as well. You've got to have people who are going to listen to you, and not just, we don't want to be a community that's always shouting. Okay, we want to be a community that's a bit more proactive. We also want to be a community that's not reactionary. We don't want to be a community that's reactionary all of the time. We want to be able to be thinking about our future, our concerns, and how we're going to put that on the table. So yeah, absolutely. It's completely vital that from any age, basically, to get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that analogy of the marathon is great. But maybe if we take a step back to analyze that issue of why people historically haven't been getting involved, Pranavji, why do you think that is? Going off of what Jayesh said, that there's been a turning point. But before that, why was the Hindu community largely unheard in politics? What was that mindset?
Vibhasha, excellent question. And what I would say is, in the first instance, I think there's a need for all minority groups to be involved, whether you're a female, whether you're of any minority group. But of course, the Hindu population do constitute about 1.5% of the United Kingdom. So it is important that they do get a say in what's on the table, as it were. Now, I just want to pick on something you said. So, are the Hindu community engaged? And if so, why not? And if you would indulge me, I'd just like to share with you the results of a survey we did recently. The APPG, as well as an organization we founded called the British Hindu Report, did a poll of 1,474 British Hindus. And if I may just share some really interesting stats with you, because it may well be quite surprising. So the first question we asked was to the British Hindus is, do you normally vote in general elections, right? And of those asked, 92.6% said yes. 7.4% said no. So almost 100% of British Hindus actually go out there to vote, which is fantastic. And it shows that we are engaged, but somewhere along the line, we stop our engagement with politics. Because hear this statistic. When the British Hindu community were asked, would you ever consider running for political office, maybe in a local or national election? Only 8.1% said likely, and 3.1% said definitely. So what we see here is something really interesting. The Hindus are engaged. They are engaged in politics, but only up to a point. And that point is putting a cross at the ballot box on election day. But somewhere along the line, we're not translating that into active representation of politics by way of standing as a politician. And that's really interesting, because the Hindu community have always actually had community at their heart. Their selfless service is part and parcel of what we all do. But we're not quite translating that in the political sphere. And actually, to answer your question, why that may well be the case, I think role models might be one of them. I think, like you said, Vibhasha, and as Jayesh has touched on, we have made some progress in terms of getting good role models out there. But I also think that there is what we call this stigma or ugliness attached to politics, which may make people think, you know what, as a Hindu family, yes, politics is so important, but it's not for my child. It's not for my child. We believe it's so important, but my son is going to be a doctor, an accountant, a lawyer. They're not going to go into politics. And I think that is the problem. Many Hindus believe, yes, let's stand on the sidelines and say how amazing politics is. We'll go out there and vote. But the moment, it comes to your son or daughter, so, kind of going out there and flying the flag for a political party or for a cause, we retreat. And I think that is where I think there is some work to be done.
So what is that work? How can we get that mentality into our generation, maybe into our parents' generation, my parents' generation of, we can sit here and we can lament that there's no Hindus, but, let's also actively encourage our own children to go out there. How do we change that mindset? This is a hard question.
Would you like me to answer that, or would you like Jayesh?
Yes, both of you, in fact. So Pranavji first, then Jayesh.
Well, I think you've got to look at it this way. Politics is about decision-making and governance. The minority of elected members make the decision for the majority. 650 MPs exist. We have about 66 million people impacted by the decisions of about 650 MPs. Let that just absorb that for a minute. And 1.5% of the population are Hindu and who contribute so much to our country. So in my view, if we are not stepping up, if we're not coming forward to being part of that minority of decision makers, ultimately what will happen is other people may make decisions for us. And that's why I think the first thing is understanding why it is so important to have a voice at that table or to step up and fly that flag. Because if we don't, somebody else will. And what I would like to just quickly conclude on this particular question for myself before I give way to Jayesh is that, you know, we come into this world with nothing. We leave with nothing. The only differences we can make are the impressions, the changes, and the impact we have on our communities and our society. And one of the ways we can do that is through elected politicians. So I hope maybe that would help in steering one to be a bit more warm to the idea of getting involved in some sort of representation.
Absolutely. Same question for you, Jayesh, but if you could tell us also about a link towards the APPG and how that has furthered this Hindu voice and maybe taken away parts of the stigma associated with being in politics.
Yeah, of course. See, what Pranav has just said is excellent. He's hit the nail on the head. And on a APPG perspective, if you just simply look at the register of APPGs, there are two types of APPGs that you get. One is country-wise. So I think I looked at last night, there's about 115 countries represented by cross-party parliamentarians who sit and regularly meet and discuss things about various countries. And they'll put that into some form of briefing paper for either junior ministers or civil servants or whoever there is that needs to have that information. The second type of APPG are subject matter groups, okay? And there are even more than the country groups that we've got with regards to APPGs. So with subject APPGs in that category, from A to Z, I mean, there's one probably to do with aerospace, for example, all the way down to zoos and aquariums. So in the middle, can you believe it? There's an APPG for cats, okay? And it's to do with animal feline welfare. Don't ask me anything more about that. That's what I saw yesterday. Okay, so if there's an APPG for cats, obviously there's going to be APP. We need an APPG now for British Hindus. But what Pranav said, he hit the nail on the head. And I always go back to this. Any problem that the British Hindu community faces, it's not really. It's as if someone else is giving us that issue whereby as a community it has never been an issue, okay? And everyone's trying to box a minority or subdivide or categorize everyone, and that's how you're seeing it now. The amount of splits there are, people are not united. What we have to offer are principles such as unity. How to work in a harmonious way, seva, dharma, righteousness, for example. How all of these things can be used as a tool to better various either industries or the NHS or welfare system, whatever the case may be. We have got a lot to offer. The second thing is, when I think both of you have used the phrase that British Hindus have been lagging behind getting involved in politics, because actually at the end of the day, we don't create a fuss. We haven't got that many issues. We tend to get on, and you could put a Hindu in any corner of the planet. He's going to make that corner of the planet his home, and he's just simply going to get on. There's not much really that affects us as far as the wider world are concerned. What we need to do is we need to get out of this mentality whereby, yes, you look after your friends and family. Family, is important. Your friends are important. But we've got a responsibility for society and our community. And what we need to do is stop allowing other people to impose issues upon us. We need to be a bit more proactive. So I would actually come out and say, our Hindu organizations, and there's a number of them, we need to get into this habit of actually sitting down and forecasting, having a vision. Where do we want to take the British Hindu community? Where do we see the British Hindu community in the next 20 years, 25 years? And I'd go to things like, I'm astounded that there isn't a British Hindu football player in the Premier League. These are the types of things that we need to be thinking about, and we need to make them into issues, as in not issues of concern or anything negative about it, but positioning ourselves within British society. How are British Hindus going to position themselves in British society to make British society better for everyone? And with that, the principles and the values and the ideals and the beliefs that we have, taking that with us as well. So there's so many examples that, if we actually sit down as a community or get some of our organizations thinking about this, strategy is one thing, but to identify something that we want to have in place in the next 20 years, and this is the plan that we want to implement, and everyone gets behind that plan. We also have to respect, yes, there are many many Hindu institutions, many Hindu organizations. We've got to also get out of this, sometimes I feel we've got some institutional ego at play, you see. And what we need to do is we need to allow particular organizations to excel in their sphere of expertise. And we have to simply get behind that. So I would say, for example, like Hindu Lawyers Association is a classic example. Our expertise is looking at legislation, looking at laws, looking at case law, defining it. And we've got to have that expertise in place. And we've got to be able to run with that expertise. And we've got to be able to then give that expertise to the parliamentarians when it comes to issues that the community are facing. But we have to accept that one of the only organizations that could probably do that is going to be Hindu Lawyers Association, you see? Yeah. We've got many organizations and we've got to respect where everyone sort of like sits, but have that forecast and vision at play.
Absolutely. There's so much that you said there, so many things to pick out. I just want to ask Pranavji one thing to touch upon before we go on to our Q&A, so two brief things. So firstly, the values question. And you are an example of someone that has gone out there to the community and who is a leader, who is a British Hindu leader in local politics. How have the Hindu values that you've grown up with shaped that, shaped your want to do that, or shaped the way you behave in that arena? Yeah,
Vipasha, very, very, very good question. Can I just say one thing as a starting to answering that? Yes, it is important to have Hindus in politics, but actually I think it's more important to have politicians that adopt some of the fantastic values that Hinduism imparts. I think that's very important. Having Hindus in politics is no good if, for example, they all adopt a very poor way of delivering a public service. So I think Hinduism is enriched with lessons and stories and messages that I think any person, irrespective of their background, if they were to implement, would make them very good human beings, number one, and number two, very good politicians. But in terms of the values question, well, if we look at our scriptures and we look at our saints and our leaders from the past, they have given us so many teachings that if we were to implement, we could be fantastic politicians. I mean, what about the lesson of loyalty, dedication that we see in Hanumantada in the Ramayana? And what if we were just to maybe take one aspect of his character and were to implement that in our day-to-day life? And if a politician were to adopt that level of service and dedication in their day-to-day life, how fantastic would that be? If we look at the Bhagavad Gita, one of my favorite chapters is chapter 2, verse 47. And what it says in summary, I'm not going to recite it because I can't, but what it does say is do your duty and don't worry too much about the results. And that probably seems quite difficult as a politician because it is all about winning and losing, right? Wrong. No, being a politician is only a means. It's a tool. It's a means to an end. It's a means to creating a better area or a more prosperous community in which you live on. And if we look at people like Swami Vivekananda, he said, "Arise, awake, don't stop until the goal is reached." Or we look at Pramukh Swami of BAPS, who says, you know, "In joy of others lies our own." I mean, I don't think Hinduism is short of lessons that politicians in this day and age can really digest and execute in their day-to-day life. And I think that is the case you don't have to be a Hindu to implement these lessons. And, you know, there are many parliamentarians in our current parliament who I think adopt Hindu principles and messages who aren't Hindu. And so I think that's just as important. Yes, having people who look the same as you and have the same faith as you is important by way of representation, but having the messages and the lessons that Hinduism teaches, I think makes for an all-rounder when it comes to actually doing the job that you're supposed to be doing.
Absolutely. I think then that speaks to, we should be promoting our culture, promoting our values, and not keeping it to our community either. These are universal values. It's, you know, Sanatan Dharma for a reason. Yeah. So let's take it to the Q&A. So the first question is a very interesting question. It's by from Sachin G. Nanda. I'm going to ask Jayesh this first. So is there any argument that the Hindu community is underrepresented when statistically there's 2%, 1.5 to 2% of us in the population? Then surely if we look at parliamentarians, I believe there's just under 10 people in the House of Commons who are of Hindu faith, a Hindu background. Then are we underrepresented at all? Surely, you know, we're fine. What's your opinions on that?
Yes, if you look at it in that way, we've got, what, 3 cabinet ministers now? At the top level, and I'd like to say Priti Patel and both Alok Sharma, who are cabinet ministers, they were one of the 2 of the founding members of the APPG. So, you know, in that sense, it looks as if we are underrepresented, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you know, the work stops there. We've got so much more to offer, and also, you know, we need more MPs, we need more parliamentarians joining all parties. Okay, we don't have that level of joining. You know, there may be more Hindu MPs in one particular political party than the other, or none in another political party. Okay, we need to encourage, as you know, more representation in all of these political parties that you know that we've got, but at the same time go with you know, the issues that our community really want to, you know, progress forward.
Pranavji, same question to you.
I think Sachin Nanda raises a very good point, and he's clearly been doing his maths, so good. But you know, when we talk about politics, it's a lot more than Westminster politics, you know. And whilst I think Sachin Nanda is absolutely right, we probably are about right in terms of representation when it comes to Westminster politics. The question is, you know, how many people in banks are representing their employees on various committees? How many student bodies at university beyond kind of the Hindu society have representatives from the Hindu faith? You know, politics is nothing more than representation, which goes way beyond Westminster. Unfortunately, it's only the Westminster politics that makes the news. So actually, I believe that whilst we're not doing too badly on Westminster kind of politics side, I think there is a big argument that Hindus and people with Hindu values, which I think is as important, are taking on roles in all sorts of organisations in terms of representing their society or community.
Absolutely, brilliant. So another question asked by Atharva Joshi, very interesting question. What would a dharmic system of politics look like? Would it be similar or different to systems that we have now in place, such as a democracy or a meritocracy? this a hefty question. I'll come to you, Jayesh, first. What does a dharmic system of politics look like?
Oh, where everyone is everyone's opinions are taken together, where it's a harmonious way of, implementing, coming to a consensus, where we're not subdividing, we're not disuniting people. We are trying to create, a system. I mean, I'm no expert in this area, but I would say, and I would imagine that it would be a process whereby you are taking everyone's, opinions on board, whereby you can really sustain integral humanism principles. I would suggest that's something that would, that's what I would think that would be a dharmic way of introducing, policies, for example, into politics and implementation of that.
Yeah, definitely. Pranav, same question to you.
Well, I thought, I don't know if it's Mr. or Miss Joshi, but I thought that was a really good question. Is that Jayesh went before me. But what I would say is, one thing that Hindus really do believe in is, the world is one family. And in many ways, people think, well, how does that quite work with politics? Because, you have oppositions and sometimes all sorts of things go out in the media and in the press. But I largely agree with what Jayesh said. I think it's absolutely fine. And I think you can still have a dharmic politics in disagreeing with your opponent, as long as you are respectful in doing so. And in many ways, embrace the difference. I don't think difference is necessarily a bad thing. And once elected, I actually think a dharmic politics is not just looking out for your own people or your own kind of Hindu constituents. Actually, if we really believe that the world is one family, that would mean working really hard for all people to create a happiness across different faiths, creeds, colors, religions. And very importantly, a politician is first and foremost a public servant, a servant of the public. A politician should be working to serve the public rather than serving their ego. And I think as long as a politician remembers that their service is first to community and society before their ego, I think we would lead a much more dharmic form of political engagement. It's about the duty, not the result. Do the work and the fruits will follow.
Really great, really interesting stuff there. And very good question from Atharva. So I'd now like to just ask you both for some closing words of wisdom as we are coming to an end of our session. And perhaps in particular, maybe in those brief words, you could touch upon how youngsters can get involved in politics practically. Pranavji, yourself first.
Okay. Well, the first thing I would like to say is, thank you everyone for listening. I would like to conclude by saying that in our political world, I think there is a desperate need for diversity from all sides of the spectrum, including having more Hindus being elected in roles and positions of responsibility. I think like I said earlier, Hindu scriptures, Hindu leaders in the past provide really good lessons and morals that make for not only good human beings, but also good politicians. And I think in terms of answering your question about how we could get, how one could get involved, I think the first thing is have an opinion on things, have an opinion on things that are going on around you. Jayesh said that, we're quite easygoing. We don't have many issues as a community, but that doesn't stop you from having an opinion about everything that's going on around the world. I'm going to do a shameful plug of a book that I did write, which I know you touched on, and I am giving free copies out to anyone that's interested. I can send a link via Vipasha, but this is all, it's called Get Me Elected, Strategies to Get Elected, basically. And I think it might be worth, if you are contemplating whether to stand in some sort of election, but you're a bit worried as to, how it all might pan out, then by all means, have a read. You might actually find something of interest. And, you know, if you are interested in local politics or national politics, join a local association, political association, whatever your political allegiance is, and just start getting involved. I wouldn't worry too much about what people will think. If you've got a reason to get involved, if you feel you want to get involved, do so. So I'd just like to say best of luck to anyone who is looking to get involved. And yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Pranavji. Jayesh.
Yeah, I just wanted to firstly congratulate T.H.E.S.E for putting on this conference, the Hindu Experience, and it's really good that you had this particular topic, because I feel as a community we're sort of like coming around the corner now, and more things are going to start to happen. I'll just touch upon a couple of examples that we've done via the APPG for the very first time that happened in Parliament. Things like explaining Raksha Bandhan, the principles behind it, the significance of it, including festivals such as Makar Sankranti. All of these festivals that we have, there is a significant amount of principles, characteristics, good, positive characteristics of how a human being should behave in society, and the type of ideals that one ought to have are being explained via some of our events that we hosted for the very first time in Parliament. Now, parliamentarians for the very first time, starting to understand and appreciate, oh, right, this is what is the fabric of British Hindu society. Okay, I understand that. And they're getting familiar. That's the whole point. So even if you haven't got a passion of becoming a member of a political party, and please note, I am no member of any political party. I'm interested in the APPG for British Hindus, okay? And I doubt I'll ever become a member of a political party, but that's me. People should be encouraged to become members of a political party. But even if you don't want to become a member of a political party, that does not mean that your engagement with the political process can stop, as Pranavji has already said. We need to get our MPs and our parliamentarians familiar with what makes the British Hindu society. And just on that note, as Pranavji said at the beginning, we are going to be launching for the very first time the British Hindu Report next week, at a meeting in front of 10, 15 parliamentarians who are attending as well. And then we're going to have their backing as well. And once the analysis and all of that has happened, we'll have a tool, a resource to give to policymakers and civil servants to say, this is what makes, this is the fabric of British Hindu society. So, let's not be in a position whereby other people are imposing issues that they think are issues in the British, are issues in British Hindu community when they're not. We need to be a bit more proactive and start creating things, making subjects that are important to us. Where do we want to take the community? Where do we want to, we want more Hindus in media, sports, whatever the case may be, and start planning for that. But on that note, thank you very much for inviting me. And congratulations to T.H.E.S.E. And if anyone wants to get involved with the APPG, even as students, speak to the organizers of this event, and my details can be passed on.
Absolutely, we will definitely do that. Thank you, JSG. So we could, talk for hours and hours. I could definitely talk for hours and hours with you both about this. And hopefully there'll be other points in the future when we can talk for so long about it. But for now, we are drawing to an end of our session. And we have explored so much in this session. And I really hope that the insight and the words of wisdom and guidance and advice that both JSG and Pranavji have touched upon today really stick with us. Just key things, there are so many avenues, like JSG just said, to get involved. Pranavji said that we need to, if not us, then who? And let's take inspiration from the great Hindu characters that we've learnt about as kids. And let's use those same characteristics and be that next generation of Hindu leaders in politics, proudly showing our Hindu badge. So there's been so much to think about, so much to digest and ponder upon further. I really enjoyed hearing both of your personal journeys and the brilliant things that you've accomplished, which really serve as benchmarks for all of us and will inspire so many British Hindus and so many people watching. And again, hopefully we can take away the need for our voice as young British Hindus, and I think as youngsters in general, to be projected loudly and proudly in British politics today. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank both Pranavji and Jayesh for joining us today. It's been a wonderful discussion, discussing the Hindu voice in politics. And I really hope that you, as the speakers, enjoyed the session. And I also, of course, hope that everyone watching got a lot from the session too. So as I mentioned at the start, this is just one of the many sessions hosted this weekend by NHSF UK at the Hindu Experience Students Edition. Do join us throughout the weekend for more panels, workshops and spotlight conversations like this one. And please do visit nhsf.org.uk/these-2020 to see what else we have coming up today and indeed tomorrow as well. Dhanyawad and namaste.